welcome back to Jönköping, Sweden. I'm Corey Dunn alongside Lurpus and Threat, and Red Eye, of course, joined us in the day one and day two and broke everything down with us. But we're finally here in the finals. This is what has come down to it. We had so many different international teams that have made their way here into Sweden at the DreamHack winter event for Counter-Strike Global Offensive, sponsored by Logitech, Kingston HyperX, as well as Thor. And what brought us into first, we had group play. Also, at the same time, we had BYOC qualifiers going on at the exact same moment during Group A and Group B. But let's go ahead and start to break things down right at the base level where everything started here in day one here in Sweden. We had the group play in Group A, which a lot of times in terms of what we talked about throughout the forums and everything with that, the Group A was that group of death, but is really based on the idea of the 1.6 playstyle that's coming in from ESC Gaming and Fnatic and their history of what they had in Counter-Strike 1.6.
Yeah, it was the whole group of death name really came from the name of the organization,
right?
More so than anything. Also the players, but mostly just the organizations. That's what the whole big fuss was about. Fnatic, I think Fnatic surprised us a little bit by beating ESC, and they were actually fairly close to beating Mouseboard. That could have easily gone either way, and seeing how well Mouse could play later on in the tournament, it's a little surprising that they had such issues with Fnatic there. Obviously, NIP was just a level above everyone else. They had a little scare against Mouseboards in group stage, but I think the semifinal match was a lot closer in the first map, because in the group stage, NIP was still in the lead the whole time, so you have that extra comfort, and it's a little different to play in the lead.
Yeah, talking in terms of what Fnatic was able to do, they faced off against ESC. Their first game was against NIP, which is a very tough first match. Again, NIP, basically a whole nother level than any of these other Counter-Strike Global Offense teams. They were on Nuke and won that, or lost to NIP 16-6. And then against ESC Gaming is where they actually came out and won that match on Nuke 16-7. So a complete flip of the script there for Fnatic. And then against Mousesports, they were at 16-14. Of course, Mousesports, as we already know, was the only team that's really contended against NIP, except for that game 2 of the best of 3 here in the semifinals, which we'll get to in just a moment. So from that point, NIP and Mousesports moved on from that group play. As we look over on the other side, though, for Group C for Very Games, how did that kind of pan out? What was your thought process on Very Games? We'll send this over to Threat. Your thought process on Very Games in group play.
I mean, they looked kind of shaky, but they still managed to, they played well enough to win all 3 games. But to be honest, I was more impressed by Mousesports in the group play than Very Games.
I agree with that entirely. The fact is, I mean, Very Games in their first matchup, they're against Absolute Legends, which one of the BYOC teams, which ended up getting second out of that group play. That score was 16-11, 16-12 against Hawks, and 16-3 against 3D Max. Of course, that last matchup was basically already a toss match because 3D Max knew they were going home. They didn't have any chance, and Very Games already knew that they were going to have the #1 seed just based off of statistics. But what was your take from Very Games and watching their matchups over there in the tournament area?
Well, I agree with Threat completely. I feel like they looked fairly shaky. They didn't execute well at times. I think in the match against Hawks won more gun rounds, which is usually the sign of being the better team. Usually the better team wins more gun rounds than the weaker team makes the score close by winning the pistol rounds. But in that game, it was actually flipped completely opposite. But I mean, they still pulled through, and now they've made their way to the finals. So obviously, they are still the second best team out there.
Which is also a really cool point is whenever we got into the finals, or into the playoff bracket with the quarterfinals, we had NIP, which is from Sweden, ProGaming.td, which is from Brazil. We also had the Copenhagen Wolves, as well as Mousesports, which is a mix between the English and Norwegians. We also had the French team from Very Games, and also Dynamic, which is the American team, and the 2 BYOC teams coming here from Sweden. It's just a real international affair across the board for all of these teams. But that brings us to our first matchup in the quarterfinals. What did we take from the matchup between NIP and the Brazilians, ProGaming.td?
Well, I mean, the first map was just pure dominance by NIP. There was a little sign of maybe the Brazilians fighting back towards the end of the first half on Mirage. I think they won about 4 rounds in a row towards the end. Made the half bearable, but then in the second half, they lost a pistol round and could never really recover, and that basically just ended that game. You guys were casting that game. I was watching in the tournament area,
right.
But I know the second map was a lot closer. On Inferno, NIP actually had to fight for it in the second half.
Yeah, actually, I think one of the key rounds was that half buy that NIP managed to win when Get Right picked up the scout from T-Spawn.
Oh, that
on
was
the
so
floor.
sick.
Yeah, apparently one of the Brazilian had bought a scout by mistake, dropped it in T-Spawn, and when Get Right was going to save it, he actually picked up that scout and managed to get the enter frag the next round with it.
It was such a beautiful shot. It's one of those things that you always consider thinking, well, he's got the scout on Inferno. He's just going to do it. It's one of those instincts. You just know it's Get Right. He's going to come out there and make an amazing shot. Well, then also at the exact same time, Very Games was facing off against Dynamic. And how did that first matchup look with Dynamic and Very Games?
I don't know really. I didn't see so much from that game. I was actually watching the Absolute Legends game.
Yeah, so you were taking a look over there at what was going on between the two BYOC teams, between Lemon Dogs and Absolute Legends. In the beginning, it looked as if that they're on DE Inferno for Team Dynamic, that they were having some really good games that were going on. The issue is for Dynamic at that point is that they were losing those 2-on-4, those 3-on-2 battles that were going on, even though they had the upper hand in the numbers advantage. Of course, we can go back to that one round where they had 4 players left alive inside of the A bomb site, and then Adren tosses a nade in and actually ends up killing one of his teammates. Then right after that, MBK comes up with the first kill, and after that, you're down to a 2-on-2, and it ends up working out in favor there of the French from Very Games. They were able to take that game, and then they even take the series because Team Dynamic in the second game, it seemed as if they kind of lost everything at that point. So that took us to a 2-0 victory there for Very Games. Carrying that over into the semifinals, though, as we look over here between NIP. And we can kind of take a look at the clips while we watch here between NIP and Mouse Sports. But going to the first map, you had a chance to check out over in the tournament area. But first, I'm going to shoot over to you because the beginning part, let's talk about what Mouse Sports was doing right whenever they took that 9-0 victory.
Yeah, they were executing perfectly, like perfect A splits, as we're going to see here.
Yeah, so let's begin to see while we're kind of breaking things down here. This is what happened here on DE Dust 2. Is where they started to make their shots here with Mouse Sports. Again, they had the lead at 9-0. So what were they doing right to get to 9-0?
They were just executing standard B splits and A splits, and after 9-0, Freiberg managed to win 2 rounds by himself, and somehow I think that ignited something for NIP.
So once that ignition happened there, Lurpus, what exactly happened to the mental game for Mouse Sports at that point?
Well, I think Rattlesnake started yelling about 3 times more than the previous day, which is
That's insane.
which is a merit in its own. He was smashing some keyboards around, yelling at his teammates. You know, the usual. If you've ever had the pleasure of watching him play live, it ended in the second half when they started losing a couple more rounds, and it looked like NIP was indeed gonna force a comeback and win the match, when Stinger just basically got up, told him to shut the F up and just play. And ever since then, the whole team was just done. I mean, Rattlesnake basically didn't say a word after that in the entire series. They had like a 30-minute break.
That's what I was about to ask you about.
It was actually because of Get Right. He thought he had some issues with his computer that he wanted to go over, which is perfect for Mouse Sports. They needed as long of a break as possible. I was saying, if I was Get Right, like, there's probably not going to be anything they can fix on the computer. Like, he just probably something he feels is wrong. So they should just play, because Mouse Sports is feeling so bad after that loss. But instead, they give him like 30 minutes. But Rattlesnake just stares at his monitor blindly the whole time, as if he had like blinders on for 30 minutes. Just stares at it. People try to talk to him. It's like he doesn't even know anyone else is there, and that's about it. Like he mentally checked out after they lost that 9-0 lead, and I honestly don't know how a team with him can win those close games if that's how he's gonna react every single time. Because let's face it, it's Counter-Strike. You're not always gonna be the front-running team and win from beginning to the end. That's the easiest part when you have those games. The hard part is climbing back.
One of the interesting things, too, is the individual skill from every single one of the players from Mouse Sports is up there. I'd go ahead and say that they are individually really good. PRB had some amazing rounds that he picked up. MX has tons of highlights that are going to come from this tournament. Also, of course, Stinger, who came out of nowhere, started to make some really good playing styles. You can take a look here. Rattlesnake, this was his only round where he went off the hook there on DE Nuke. He picked up multiple kills, and it still didn't make a difference in this game. But again, if you just look at it, it definitely makes an impact on your team. It's a team game in the end of it all. You can have the most great individual gameplay, but still at the end of it, you need your team to win rounds. You can't ace everything.
Yeah, plus, I mean, let's be real. When we compare the individual skill, Mouse Sports is a skilled team, no doubt about it, but they're not NIP. NIP is on a level of their own individually. If we talk strategies and we talk team play, NIP might not even be in the top 2. But when we talk individual skill, NIP is on the roof of a skyscraper. Everyone else is still running up the stairs on the 3rd floor.
It's a very good way of looking at it, probably on DE Vertigo. Terrible joke, but we'll keep moving on here. So again, we're here on, if we look at what happened here with Very Games and their matchup against Lemon Dogs. We don't have a clip from it, but during their series, I expected Lemon Dogs, honestly, I expected them to kind of push through that tournament. To push on through against Very Games, because Very Games was lackluster in their matchup. Even though they beat Dynamic 2-0, I still did not feel like they were playing at a high level.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Lemon Dogs has been playing so well this
Very
tournament,
well.
and especially the player Twist. He really amazed me a few times.
Oh, I agree with that entirely.
I mean, I didn't expect them to beat Very Games, but I expected them to put up a fight.
I really thought the series would go into 3 maps. I was looking at the statistics before I came over here from the tournament area, and Twist seemed to have finished -7 and -10 in the 2 maps.
Really?
So, I mean, their team lost quite a bit, so that sort of explains it. But, you know, he was definitely the driving force in all of their previous wins. And if he wasn't having a great game, then that's going to affect the whole team. But also, you know, you have to consider that maybe this entire team is just getting outshot and outplayed in every possible way. And in that scenario, it's a lot harder for anyone to shine. And, I mean, we've talked about this before. Very Games, they look sloppy in the group play. Didn't look that promising. Even in the quarterfinals, they just looked average. But the later it gets in the tournament, the better they get, or at least good enough to get to the finals. Where so far, I mean, let's face it, they haven't really been able to compete with NIP. And the latest example of that came just 4 or 5 days ago in the Thor Open qualifier, where NIP started on Terrorists as train and beat them 16-5.
Wow. And so that's going to bring us into this matchup. Let's kind of compare the 2 teams right now here between NIP and Very Games. We have a short moment before this match will go live here in a little bit. So first, as we look at it between NIP and Very Games Threat, I'm going to toss this over to you and get your opinion on this matchup right now. How do you see this one ending up? You can be honest. It's okay.
2-0 to NIP, and I don't think Very Games will get over 10 rounds.
A little too honest for me. That you can dole it back a little bit.
Yeah, the thing is, I agree with Tommy here. I actually think Very Games is just good enough to get to the final. I actually think, like, if Very Games would have played Mouse Sports or even Fnatic, I think they might have lost. I don't know.
Wow, so you're bringing up the fact that Very Games, again, they're just not playing at their highest level as possible. Now, at the same token, they have won a bunch of clutch situations. It's just the fact that they keep losing so many members and the random buying that they're doing on their eco rounds. Just it's not typical play that you go through. And but how do you see this one panning out here?
Well, I also agree. I think NIP is going to win 2-0. I'm not sure if Very Game is going to get close or not, because scores don't always reflect on how close the game actually is. But I think NIP is going to win fairly easily. And it's getting loud back there. I think that NIP just has too much individual skill. The thing is, Very Games has a couple of really good players. NBK, Smits, and Kenny S have all shown some really nice rounds over here. But the problem is that no matter how good their strats is, no matter how much time Existence spends preparing perfect strategies, perfect smokes, perfect flashbangs, as long as Forrest is still going to kill the first 2 guys rushing his side, they're still going to lose. There is nothing you can do to beat a better aimer unless you can blind him and kill him or kill him to his back.
They've got the number 1 player and the number 2 player being Forrest and Get Right, and both of which are on NIP, and that's definitely a really difficult scenario to work with. And then they've got some other really good players.
I would even argue that NIP has 4 of the best players in CSGO right now individually.
And I would not battle against that at all. And give you my opinion as well. I think that it's going to end up in a 2-0 victory as well in favor of NIP. But in the viewers' aspect of it, I hope it goes 16-14, even into triple overtime of some sort. But Don't count on it.
I really just hope that we see 3 maps. I've been bummed that we haven't seen 3-map series
Exactly.
yet in the playoffs. It's been a little bumming, and there's been so many series that I was so sure it was going to go in the 3-map series. I really thought Mousebirds Copenhagen Wolves would be
so as
closer.
well.
I thought Lemon Dogs Very Games would be closer. I even thought Dynamic could get a map off of Very Games. And it just been, I mean, the Swedes in the quarterfinals, I thought they would go into 3 maps. And all these matchups have just kept disappointing us.
It's as if
we want more.
It's all as if the reset button was hit for day 3 and everything. The players just forgot what they've been doing in the past. So that's going to send it to a quick commercial break. The finals for Counter-Strike Global Offensive, sponsored here by Logitech and also helped out here by Kingston HyperX and also Thorg. And I'm Corey Dunn alongside Lurpus and Threat. We'll be back with the finals. It's going to be me and Lurpus and Threat. Thanks a lot, man. You've been a great addition to the team. I've enjoyed casting with you throughout this entire event. And I'm pretty much, I'm going to make the assumption that I'm going to see you playing Go soon. Because while during the breaks, we've actually seen him playing. Well, he's been on surfing maps while still hitting some amazing shots. But at the same token, we may see him playing some CSGO if you can find time.
Yeah. You never know.
You never know.
He was ruining my stat. I've never played CS:GO on public. I've only played gathers, and he was just demolishing my stats today. Yesterday he was stat padding me. Today he was 0 and 8 on a surfing
Hey,
map.
it's got to balance out somewhere. With that, we'll sit there and send it to a quick commercial break. NIP versus Very Games in the finals for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. We'll be back with that matchup right after the break.